The year is 1898. It's the day after Boxing Day. In the little town of Gatton in Queensland. The door of the pub is banged open and there is William McNeil, but not a William McNeil that anyone else in the pub has ever seen before. Pale, shaking. 3 of the Murphys have been killed. Someone shoves a drink into his shaking hand. It was last night, Boxing Day night, we came back from the races and Michael decided that they should go to the dance that was planned there for 9 o'clock here in Gatton. I tried to talk him out of it, especially once I knew that his sisters, Nora and Ellen, were going as well. I told him that the sulky, the Murphy family sulky, it had a wobbly wheel. He shouldn't go, but you know, Michael, you know how arrogant he is. He went anyway. This morning, none of them had come back. I could follow the tracks from the Murphy place down along that lonely road from there to Gatton. And I could follow those wobbly wheel marks until they came to the slip rails of Moran's paddock and went in. I must have walked all over that big paddock before I found them. The 3 bodies. Ants crawling over their faces. The horse was shot too. McNeil went to the police, told them that, and then returned back to the home to tell his parents-in-law that 3 of their 7 children were murdered. By the time the Murphys got to Moran's paddock, the place was swarming with locals. All over the place, they were trampling all over the scene, looking out at the bodies, 3 bodies laid out there, just spread out, sort of a triangle. Ellen and Michael close together, and Nora a bit further away, lying on a blanket. It was 3 days before Inspector Urquhart managed to make it from Brisbane. Well, Sergeant, I'm sure you're glad to see us. I mean, here we are ready to take over from you. I dare say this is a bit beyond your reach, isn't it? You could say that. Only murder we've had here. I mean, we've got plenty of hooligans like the Quinn brothers, but nothing like this. Yes, as I say, beyond your reach. Tell me what you know already. 3 of them, Nora and Michael and Ellen, they were all bludgeoned to death and then shot. The girls had both been raped and there was semen on Michael's trousers. The horse had been shot too. They were bound before they were shot. At least we think so. And they were laid out there in a sort of a triangle. There were 2 pieces of paper that we could manage to find, a memorial notice for a local girl, May Cook, who died 2 years ago. Dodgy the way she died. The parents weren't proud of her. And then there was a paper from the local agricultural college that the Murphy brothers went to. That was out on near the slip rails too. Don't worry, my men will take care of everything. First of all, I plan to organise a thorough system of interviews. You want to see the bodies? But Urquhart had no wish to see the bodies. Instead, he went through his interviews but there were plenty of letters that were arriving all the time, mostly from that well-known informer, Anonymous. But Urquhart had been in the police force a bit too long to believe the malicious spite that's going to pour out from local hicks. As you would expect, it's normal parochial sort of concerns there, or the accusations against the Murphy brothers or the Murphy family and how they behaved when Protestant McNeil had married one of the Murphy girls. And then again, how the Murphy boys had treated the local Protestant girls. Urquhart didn't pay any attention to that sort of nonsense. He gathered some more evidence. I mean, there were at least 8 people who could talk about seeing someone in a dark coat who had been lurking beside Moran's paddock that night. But the most interesting one was one woman who'd said that round about 10 o'clock, that's about an hour after the dance that they'd been going to had been cancelled, she thought she'd heard a shot and a woman's voice screaming something that sounded like, could it have been father, father? And then another shot. After a few months, Urquhart went home. He filled out his report, such as it was. This case couldn't be solved because there was no way it ever could be solved. Clearly, this was the work of one man, a stranger who came into town, committed these atrocities, and left. We will likely never know who it was. But the answer was actually there the whole time. In those interviews and in those many, many letters that Urquhart hadn't read. And it was about 120 years later that a crime historian called Stephanie Bennett put it all together. And this is the story that she put together. I'll give you another few moments if you've got any further ideas. I will say that it's unlikely that you'd be able to name the person on the basis of just what I've said. But if you were the police officer, you could well have an idea of persons of interest or a line of inquiry that you might want to pursue. Christmas Eve, and Michael Murphy, such a big man is Michael Murphy, such a big man in the family, in Gatton, and the whole district. But Christmas Eve, he's a worried man. He's still sitting in the back kitchen drinking late at night when his youngest brother, Patrick, makes his way in. I thought you'd be later than this. Weren't you going to stop off in Barlow's pub? I thought that's why you'd be so late getting back. Yeah, well, Barlow's wasn't too welcoming. I didn't feel too at home there. Decided to make myself scarce. So you've been sniffing around Barlow's wife again, have you? Oh, my God, Michael. One of these days, you're going to bite off one more than you can chew. You're not going to be able to keep on getting away with it, you know. Oh, so little brother's still upset because I got his girl, is he? You're going to have to learn to live with some things, aren't you? 3 girls. 3 girls, Michael. 3 girls pregnant. 2 of them are thankful to still be alive after visiting the doctor. May Cook, she wasn't so fortunate, was she? It's like Mum says, if these girls go and get themselves pregnant, they deserve what they get. Not my problem. Time for bed. But Patrick, he thought that Michael too deserved something. And he wasn't the only one. At the Boxing Day races, he managed to meet up with some of the local hooligans, like the Quinn brothers, Jo and Martin. Oh yeah, they'd had enough of Michael Murphy too. He dobbed them in. That was why Jo had been in prison the last time, on account of Michael bloody Murphy. Yeah, it was about time he learned a few lessons, wasn't it? Oh, others gathered around there, brothers of girls, local girls that Michael Murphy had discarded, and together they came up with a plan. Nothing too serious. It was simple enough. All they had to do was get Michael to go to this local dance and then know when it was cancelled, make sure it was cancelled. And then they would know if the dance that he was going to was at 9 o'clock, it wouldn't be much later that he was heading back in the sulky, going along that lonely road. And William McNeil could make sure that he was in that time at that place. Jo Quinn, he could be waiting at the slip rail and ready to move him into that paddock, and then a little bit of salutary punishment would take place. Jo Quinn was happy enough. He headed off there, and Martin Quinn, he ended up sending off the finishing and cancelling the dance, while William McNeil went back home to the Murphys' place. That turned out to be a bit harder because two of the girls wanted to go along as well, and he really tried to stop them, but how bad could it be? And Patrick pushed to the back of all these queues, is getting a little bit nervous. So Jo Quinn, he turns to me, don't worry about it, Pat. It's not going to be too bad. Just teach your brother a little bit of respect. I mean, you know he needs it. Pat knew he needed it. So it all went pretty much according to plan. There comes the Murphy sulky going along the road from Gatton, heading homewards. There's Jo Quinn lurking in the shadows. And then he moves forward. Michael turns to the two girls. Don't say a word. Just let him say what he has to say. Don't worry about anything. Nothing will happen while I'm here. Jo opens up the slip rails and he pulls forward the sulky into the paddock, but they hadn't gone more than 100 yards. Then others emerge from the trees. It's a mob of strangers. Patrick and McNeil, they're out at the slip rails. Pat didn't want to be part of it, of course, so they have no idea what's going on. The mob gets bigger and more. Martin Quinn starts it off. He takes out the memorial notice of May Cook and he shoves it in Michael Murphy's face. And then he holds a sort of a mock trial. And the mob, they're drinking and they're getting louder and they're getting more drunk and they're getting more tough and harder. And then they start to bash and they bind up the wrists of all three, bind them up with handkerchiefs, and then they start to attack. And they can beat them down. The girls are raped. Nora is struggling to get away, her hands bound, but she's pulled back, dragged back. She's trying to get to the horse, but she's pulled back, and then they start to rape her, and all she can do is scream, "No, Martin, no!" She's bashed. She doesn't speak again. And the horse that she could have escaped on, or Ellen, or Michael, it's shot too. After a while, Pat says, back at the slip rail, he'd better be getting home, otherwise people might get suspicious. But William McNeil, his brother-in-law, he says, he just wants to go and have a look. He wants to have a look at Michael's face. But as he makes his way through the trees, it's not Michael he sees, it's Ellen. Ellen being gang raped by a bunch of thugs. And further aside, he can see Nora, so he goes over and he picks up her barely breathing body and carries it over to a blanket. What more can he do? Afterwards, out of all that mob of alcoholics and braggarts and criminals, not one talked. And in the years that went on, they all lived long lives with exactly the destiny that they would have had if Boxing Day 1898 had never taken place. As for the Murphys, they closed ranks, mostly to protect Patrick and, just incidentally, McNeil. But there was never any sign of them falling out or any kind of disharmony at all. Maybe in the way families do to survive, they simply never spoke of it again.